They called him Sonny, and for a time, he sold the American people the sun itself. Not the real one, of course, but something far more intoxicating. The promise of a life so bright, so golden, that it would burn away the shadows of ordinary existence forever. And for this promise, a nation would pay a price it couldn't possibly imagine. Our story begins in an age of dizzying heights and boundless optimism, the era they called the Roaring Twenties. It was a time of jazz and electricity, of soaring skyscrapers and the feeling that humanity had finally broken its chains. But there was one kingdom that remained locked away from the common man, the kingdom of Wall Street. Finance was a cold, quiet affair, conducted in hushed tones within marble halls, a private game for the immensely wealthy. It was a world of insiders, of inherited fortunes, where the gates were firmly shut to the teacher, the farmer, the factory worker. Until Arthur, Sonny Vance, decided to kick them wide open. Arthur Vance was not a man of old money. He was a force of nature, a whirlwind of ambition with a smile that could disarm a cynic at 20 paces. He looked at the vast, untapped ocean of middle-class savings and saw not just an opportunity, but a crusade. Why, he asked, should the fruits of American prosperity be enjoyed only by a select few? Why shouldn't the baker who baked the nation's bread, or the steelworker who forged its spine, own a piece of the dream they were building? He took the helm of a respectable but unremarkable institution, the People's Trust Bank, and declared his vision. He would create a financial supermarket, a place where anyone, with any amount of money, could come and buy their ticket to wealth. The transformation was breathtaking. The dusty, intimidating lobbies of the People's Trust were reborn. They became bright, open spaces, filled with welcoming faces and the scent of new money. Vance understood something profound about the human psyche. People don't buy stocks and bonds, they buy hope. And he packaged that hope better than anyone in history, unleashed an army of salesmen, a legion of bright-eyed, fast-talking young men and women he called Vance's vanguard. They weren't trained in the dreary science of risk assessment. They were trained in the art of the sale. They fanned out across the country, from the bustling avenues of New York to the quiet dirt roads of the Midwest, armed with glossy brochures and an unshakable belief in their leader. And then came the advertising. In an age when the public was just beginning to place its faith in the printed word and the disembodied voice on the radio, Vance became a master of mass persuasion. Full-page newspaper ads screamed headlines like, "Own a piece of the American machine," and "Your neighbor is getting rich. Why aren't you?" His campaigns didn't speak of balance sheets or price-to-earnings ratios. They spoke of freedom, of security, of the new car your family deserved, of the college education you could finally afford for your children. They tapped directly into the deepest veins of human desire, greed, and its more powerful cousin, the fear of being left behind. The nation was utterly seduced. A schoolteacher in Ohio who had scrimped and saved her entire life took her modest nest egg and handed it to a charming young man from the People's Trust, who sold her shimmering bonds from a distant South American republic she couldn't find on a map. A farmer in Iowa, hearing tales of fortunes made overnight, mortgaged the land his family had worked for 3 generations to buy into a new aviation company that had never built a single plane. A widow in Boston, seeking a safe place for her late husband's insurance money, was gently steered away from stable government bonds and into a high-yield investment pool that promised impossible returns. They weren't just customers. They were converts to the new religion of everlasting prosperity, and Sonny Vance was their high priest. Inside the gleaming offices of the People's Trust, however, a different gospel was preached. Vance operated on a simple, brutal philosophy. Asterisk, caveat, emptor, asterisk. Let the buyer beware. His responsibility, as he saw it, was not to protect his customers, but to provide them with what they craved a chance. The internal incentive structure was a marvel of cynical genius. Salesmen were not rewarded for the quality or suitability of the securities they sold, but purely for the volume. For the faster they could move the product, the bigger their commission. This created a frantic, relentless pressure to sell, regardless of the consequences. The bank's own investment arm would buy up questionable foreign bonds or package together dubious stocks. And then the sales force Vance's vanguard would be unleashed to push this financial alchemy onto an unsuspecting public. They were selling paper dreams, backed by little more than air and Sonny Vance's radiant smile. As the market climbed to ever more perilous heights, a few sober voices began to sound the alarm. The Federal Reserve, the nation's central bank, saw the rampant speculation as a wildfire threatening to consume the entire economy. They tried to raise interest rates, to gently apply the brakes and cool the speculative fever. But Arthur Vance, now one of the most powerful men in America, would have none of it. In an act of breathtaking hubris, he openly defied them. He took out more ads, announcing that the People's Trust would extend millions of dollars in credit to fuel the market, effectively thumbing his nose at the highest financial authority in the land. The public roared its approval. Sonny Vance was their champion, the man fighting the old guard to keep the dream alive for the little guy. The market surged again, and Vance's power seemed absolute, but the sun cannot shine forever. In the autumn of 1929, the sky began to darken. Impossible numbers on the ticker tapes began to falter, then stumble, then plunge into a terrifying freefall. The great crash had arrived, and as the paper fortunes of the wealthy evaporated, the real-life savings of millions of ordinary people vanished with them. The teacher in Ohio saw her bonds become worthless pieces of paper. The farmer in Iowa lost his farm. The widow in Boston was left with nothing. The hope that Sonny Vance had sold them curdled into a nationwide cry of anguish and betrayal. The public, shattered and furious, demanded answers. And so, a congressional investigation was launched, led by a man who was the complete antithesis of Arthur Vance. His name was Elias Thorne. Where Vance was bright, boisterous, and charismatic, Thorne was quiet, methodical, and relentless. He was a prosecutor with a mind like a steel trap and a deep, abiding anger for the injustice he saw. He put Arthur "Sonny" Vance on the witness stand, and under the harsh glare of the hearing room lights, the sunshine finally began to fade. Day after day, Thorne patiently, mercilessly, dismantled the myth of Sonny Vance. He brought forth internal bank documents showing that Vance's own experts knew the South American bonds were junk, even as his salesmen were calling them a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He produced evidence that the bank had packaged its own bad loans, dressed them up as shiny new securities, and sold them to its most trusting customers. He brought the victims themselves to testify, the teachers, the farmers, the widows, and their heartbreaking stories of ruin, told in plain, simple language, echoed across a shocked and outraged nation. But Thorne's final blow was the most devastating. He uncovered a piece of personal corruption so blatant, so arrogant, that it shattered any lingering image of Vance as a champion of the people. Thorne revealed that, in a year when his bank's customers lost everything, Vance had paid zero income tax. He had done it through a cynical, sham transaction, selling his own massive portfolio of bank stock to a family member at an enormous loss to create a tax write-off, only to quietly buy it all back a few weeks later. Here was the truth, laid bare for all to see. Arthur "Sonny" Vance, the man who sold the American dream, was nothing more than a cheat who rigged the game for himself while everyone else lost. The fall was as swift and total as the rise had been spectacular. His reputation was destroyed. His career was over. He became a national pariah, the face of the greed and deception that had led a nation to ruin. But his story did not end there. The wreckage he left behind became the foundation for a new, stronger financial world. The public outcry from the Thorne hearings was so immense that it forced a revolution in American finance. Congress passed the landmark Glass-Steagall Act, which built a wall between the safe, commercial banking of ordinary people and the risky, speculative world of investment banking, so a disaster like this could never happen again. They created the Securities Act, a revolutionary law based on a simple principle. A company selling an investment to the public must tell the truth about the risks involved. The era of asterisk, caveat, emptor asterisk was over. A new era of transparency and protection had begun. Arthur Vance is a name largely lost to history now, a footnote in the story of the Great Depression. But the lessons of his rise and fall echoed through the decades, a timeless and vital warning. For while the laws changed, human nature did not. The techniques he pioneered, the powerful advertising that bypasses logic and targets emotion, the exploitation of our deepest hopes and fears, the siren song of easy money, the terror of being left behind proved to be terrifyingly resilient. We saw them again in the dot-com bubble of the late 90s, and again in the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008. Each time, a new generation of Sonny Vances emerged, armed with new products and new technologies, but selling the very same intoxicating, dangerous dream. And so, the true inspiration we must draw from this story is not found in the fleeting glory of Arthur Vance's success, but in the enduring strength of those who learned from his failure. It is a call to vigilance, a reminder that true wealth is not built on frantic speculation, but on wisdom, patience, and prudence. It teaches us that when a promise seems too good to be true, it is our duty to ourselves and to our families to ask the hard questions, to look past the dazzling smile and the glossy brochure, and to seek the unvarnished truth. For the sun can warm and nurture, but it can also blind and burn. And the brightest sunshine, as a nation once learned at a terrible cost, can sometimes cast the very darkest of shadows.